Welcome to Verbal Pick Radio, where we give you a verbal image of life, and we are everyday people. I'd like to welcome you all to the show. So, currently, I'm watching the 1619 Project on Hulu, which is an excellent documentary and dealing with slavery and the contributions that black people made to the Americas. Actually, hell, there would be no Americas if it wasn't for the sweat equity that the slaves put into this country to make this country the greatest country on the planet, to where everybody's flocking here, even though the ones that built it is still having problems with justice, freedom, independence, and equality. But what is this 1619? Why do we keep starting at the year 1619? Right? So let me take you back to 1555, when the first slave ships were in the waters. And this particular slave ship was called Jesus. And the captain of that ship was John Hawkins. So let us delve into that, right? Because we got to get to the before the 1619. We're getting past 1555 and we jumping straight into 1619. And I don't know why, and I don't know why historians, especially black historians, are not touching base on 1555 and the slave ship Jesus by John Hawkins. He was an admiral, a privateer, he was a slave trader. Sir John Hawkins, he was born in 1532, died 1595. He was one of the most notable sailors and naval commanders of the 16th century. He is known for his pivotal role in the maritime history of England and the rise of the global slave trade. How can you miss this guy? How can you miss John Hawkins? He was born into a wealthy maritime family in Plymouth. His father, William Hawkins, had visited the New World in 1527, right? His dad came into the Americas in 1527. Mind you, all this was taking place after the Inquisition and after the Moors had lost Spain and before Columbus set sail to the Americas in 1492, and he had the Moors and Jews had to vacate Spain, and they traveled to the Americas. Now, he visited the New World in 1527 and traded in Guinea and Brazil. He was also a prominent figure in the court of Henry VIII. By his mid-20s, Hawkins was already making voyages to many major ports, such as the Canary Islands. While mainly trading in textiles and sugar, there are accounts involving Hawkins and piracy. Sea dogs. In the 15th century, there was a thin line between piracy and a privateering. A privateer was an individual licensed to attack and raid shipping belonging to an enemy government, usually during a war. These private contractors would then pay a cut of their bounty back to the government. In this case, Sir John Hawkins, Sir Francis Drake, and Sir Martin Frobisher, and Sir Walter Raleigh, known collectively as the Sea Dogs, were a group of commissioned by the Queen to attack and loot the Spanish fleet. While England was not at war with Spain, Queen Elizabeth I gave the Sea Dogs legitimacy in England to plunder Spanish ships, to maintain maritime dominance over trade passages. Similar privateering activities were carried out by the Spanish fleet with the guard coasters and many of the Barbary corsairs, Moors. However, the relative size and speed of the English fleet aided the English in substantially reducing the power of the Spanish navy. These actions were a determining factor in King Philip II's attempt invasion of England with the Spanish Armada. While several other Englishmen had already taken slaves from Africa by the mid-15th century, John Hawkins effectively set the pattern that became known as the English slave trade triangle. History: John Hawkins, slave ship, Jesus. Come on, we got to do the knowledge on that. Early in his career, he led an expedition in which he violently captured 300 Africans in Sierra Leone. Violently now. Captured 300 Africans in Sierra Leone and transported them to Spanish plantations in the Americas. This is John Hawkins. This is the slave ship Jesus. This got to be in history books. There he traded them for pearls, hides, and sugar. His missions were so lucrative that Queen Elizabeth I sponsored his subsequent journeys and provided ships, supplies, and guns. She also gave him a unique coat of arms bearing a bound slave. That was his coat of arms. This was before 1619. He's in the slave trade. The Queen gave him a coat of arms with a slave bound on him. With 3 major slave expeditions in the 1560s, right? Hawkins prepared the path for the slave triangle between England, Africa, and the New World, America. English goods were traded in West Africa. Slaves were captured and trafficked on the notorious Middle Passage across the Atlantic, and cargo produced in the New World was transported back to England. His 4 voyages to Sierra Leone between 1564 and 1569 took a total of 1,200 Africans across the Atlantic to sell to the Spanish settlers in the Caribbean islands and Hispaniola. Sir Francis Drake, one of the 12 brothers, was raised and educated by the affluent Hawkins family. So now you have this was a family thing, right? Francis Drake was raised by John Hawkins' family, and they schooled him on how to keep the slave business going. It was quite commonplace for cousins such as Drake to be brought up by wealthier relatives. John Hawkins was about 12 years Drake's senior. His expertise and influence led to Drake joining Hawkins in his privateering activities. This included Drake's command of many campaigns against the Spanish naval forces and his later appointment as vice admiral in the engagement against the Spanish Armada. Hawkins has spent his life around ships and learning the particulars of sea warfare. Working as a shipwright, he stressed the importance of producing faster vessels with better mobility and long-range combat capabilities. These designs directly influenced the later frigates of the 18th century. By 1587, the English Navy included 25 of these refurbished galleons and 18 smaller warships. These were essential in the later battles against the Spanish Armada. For his assistance in growing the Navy and supporting English maritime power, Elizabeth I appointed Hawkins as rear admiral for the fight against the Spanish. Set against the nation's contest for naval dominance and a backdrop of Catholic and Protestant hostility, England and Spain went from small skirmishes into non-declared warfare, culminating in the Spanish fleet attempt to invade England in 1589. So they fighting against themselves. At first, Inquisition, fighting against the Moors. Then after the fight against the Moors, they fighting amongst one another. In 1593, Hawkins' son Richard was captured by the Spanish in the South Atlantic. In response, Hawkins and Drake raised a fleet of 27 ships and set sail from Plymouth on 29th of August of 1595. Neither admiral would see their homeland again. The rescue attempt was hampered by disagreement, storms, and by the Spanish, who had increased their presence in the area. Hawkins died on the 12th of November in San Juan off the coast of Puerto Rico. Drake sailed across the Spanish Main towards Panama in an attempt to escape. However, in January 1596, off the coast of Portobello in Panama, dysentery swept through the fleet, killing him on the 26th. Drake's body, like that at Hawkins before him, was interred at sea. So, a whole history, a whole life, a whole world was taking place before 1619 and transporting slaves from Africa to the Americas on a slave ship called Jesus by Sir John Hawkins, right, and his companion Francis Drake and others. This is history. It has to be known. Don't shy away from the fact that the ship was named Jesus in 1555, that they used to capture and carry slaves. Don't be alarmed at the fact that this all took place before 1619, although 1619 was just shoved in our heads as though this was the start of slavery in America. And it wasn't. We need to peel back the layers to figure out why this history was hidden. No one talks about John Hawkins, 1555, and the slave ship Jesus. I don't know. But look, thank y'all for tuning in to Verbal Pick Radio. Until next time, we're out.